The Odyssey by Homer. Book 3. Translation by Samuel Butler. Read for you by Devin. As the sun was rising from the fair sea. So actually they have these little blurbs up top that kind of summarize the chapter. I'll read that one to you. Telemachus is warmly welcomed by Nestor and Pylos and joins in celebrating the festival of Poseidon. Nestor tells stories of the return of himself and the other heroes from Troy, but knows nothing of the fate of Odysseus. The next day, sacrifices are offered for Telemachus' success. Nestor sends his son Pistricius with Telemachus as he continues his journey to Sparta by land. So they're on mainland Greece, it seems, or Pylos might be attached to Lacedaemon. As the sun was rising from the fair sea into the firmament of heaven to shed light on mortals and immortals. That's interesting. Mortals and immortals both have the same sun on them. So there's sort of equality there. We all partake of the same creation. Dude, sometimes you're going to hear me drink water. It's because I'm extremely hydrated. As the sun was rising from the fair sea into the firmament of heaven to shed light on mortals and immortals, they reached Pylos, the city of Neleus. Now the people of Pylos were gathered on the seashore to offer sacrifice of black bulls to Poseidon, lord of the earthquake. There were 9 guilds with 500 men in each, and there were 9 bulls to each guild. As they were eating the inward meats and burning the thigh bones on the embers in the name of Poseidon, Telemachus and his crew arrived, furled their sails, and brought their ships to anchor and went ashore. Wow, that is a lot of bulls. 9 guilds, 9 bulls to each guild, 81 bulls. And so one bull's feeding about 50 men. Wow, it's a lot of meat. It's like, that makes sense though. It's a good amount of meat. Athena led the way, and Telemachus followed her. Presently, she said, Telemachus, you must not be in the least shy or nervous. Exactly. You have taken this voyage to try and come where your father is buried and how he came by his end. Now go straight up to Nestor that we may see what he is going to tell us. Beg him to speak the truth, and he will tell no lies, for he is an excellent person. Nice. So there's a note at the bottom. It says the heart, liver, lights, kidneys, etc. are taken out from the innards and eaten first as being more readily cooked. The bone meat was cooking while the inward meat was being eaten. I imagine the thigh bones made a kind of gridiron. At the same time, the marrow inside them got cooked. So they, that's interesting. They put the bones and the organs on top of the bones and cooked them all that way. But how, Mentor, replied Telemachus, dare I go up to Nestor? And how am I to address him? Telemachus is very much a child at the beginning of this. You get to see how he becomes a man, which is really cool, because it kind of mirrors the masculine development of your own psyche if you're a man watching this. So, study Telemachus, study Odysseus, study Laertes. They model man at 3 stages of life and his proper development, which is good. But how, Mentor? Dare go to Nestor, and how am I to address him? I have never yet been used to holding long conversations with people. Oh, no. And I'm ashamed to begin questioning one who is so much older than myself. Some things, Telemachus, answered Athena, will be suggested to you by your own instinct, and heaven will prompt you further, for I am assured that the gods have been with you from the time of your birth until now. Which is funny, because she's literally a god saying that to him. She then went on, and Telemachus followed in her steps until they reached the place where the guilds of the Pylian people were assembled. There they found Nestor sitting with his sons, while his company round him were busy getting dinner ready and putting pieces of meat on to the spits. So they're very much involved with the cooking of this, which is very nice. It's like an intimate relationship between Nestor and his people we're seeing here. When they saw the strangers, they crowded round them, took them by the hand, and bade them take their places. Nestor's son Pistricius at once offered his hand to each of them and seated them on some soft sheepskins that were lying on the sands near his father and his brother Thrasymedes. So that's very smart of Nestor. He's like, oh, strangers, hello. And he just immediately puts them near him so he can get to know them and figure out what they're doing. Then he gave them their portions of the inward meats and poured wine for them into golden cups, handing it first to Athena and saluting her at the same time. That's because she's the elder, so it's a politeness thing. Offer a prayer, sir, said he, to King Poseidon for... And they said nothing yet, so they don't know that Telemachus is technically of higher status than Mentor. But you consider them almost on equal status, but Mentor is older, so there's this... Status plays a lot into all these interactions. Very fascinating. Offer a prayer, sir, he said, to King Poseidon, for it is his feast that you are joining. When you have duly prayed and made your drink offering, pass the cup to your friend that he may do also. I doubt not that he too lifts his hands in prayer, for man cannot live without God in the world. Still, he is younger than you are, and is much of an age with myself, so I will give you the precedence. Exactly. And he spoke, he handed the cup. Athena thought it was right and proper of him to have given it to herself first, and she accordingly began praying heartily to Poseidon. O thou, she cried, that encirclest the earth, vouchsafe to grant the prayers of thy servants that call upon thee. More especially, we pray thee send down grace on Nestor and on his sons. Thereafter also make the rest of the Pylian people some handsome return for the goodly hecatomb they are offering you. She's calling it out there. She's like, yes, bribing Poseidon. I get it. I love bribing Poseidon. Because Athena also, they have like a rivalry, so she has to... It's brutal. And like the layering in the Odyssey is just so great. So, pray send in grace on Nestor and his sons. Thereafter make the rest of the Pylian people some handsome return for the goodly hecatomb they are offering you. Lastly, grant Telemachus and myself a happy issue in respect to the matter which has brought us in our ship to Pylos. So she's kind of hoping that Poseidon will agree. She may have even timed it this way. Oh, shit. She did. She timed. I didn't even notice this until this reading of the Odyssey. She timed it. So Poseidon's going to agree. And then she's going to be like, Zeus, he agreed. He agreed. What do you mean? A mentor? Me? Huh. Oof, strategy, baby. Woo! It is excellent. So when she thus made the end of praying, she handed the cup to Telemachus, and he prayed likewise. By and by, when the outer meats were roasted and had been taken off the spits, and the carvers gave every man his portion, and they all made an excellent dinner. As soon as they had enough to eat and drink, Nestor, knight of Gerene, began to speak. Now, he said, that our guests have done their dinner, it will be best to ask them who they are. Who then, sir strangers, are you? And from what port have you sailed? Are you traders? Or do you sail the seas as rovers, with your hand against every man, and every man's hand against you? Wow, what a question. Are you traders, or do you sail the sea as rovers? Basically, do you have stuff for me? Or am I going to have to kill you? It's a veiled threat, not even very much veiled. Telemachus answered boldly, for Athena had given him courage to ask about his father and get himself a good name. Nestor, he said, son of Neleus, honor to the Achaean name. He's saying you honor all men of our country, being Greece, being Helen, being Hellas. You ask whence we come, and I will tell you. We come from Ithaca under Nitrium, and the matter about which I would speak is of private, not public import. I seek news of my unhappy father Odysseus, who is said to have sacked the town of Troy in company with yourself. We know what fate befell each one of the other heroes who fought at Troy, but as regards Odysseus, heaven has hidden from us the knowledge, even that he is dead at all. For no one can certify in what place he perished, nor say whether he fell in battle on the mainland, or was lost at sea amid the waves of Amphitrite, which is Poseidon's wife. Therefore I am suppliant at your knees, if haply you may be pleased to tell me of his melancholy end, whether you saw it with your own eyes, or heard it from some other traveler, for he was a man born to trouble. Do not soften things that have any pity for me, but tell me in all plainness exactly what you saw. If my brave father Odysseus ever did you, and I'm going to read, so there's a footnote at the bottom. The meat would be pierced with the skewer and laid over the ashes to grill, the two ends of the skewer being supported in whatever way might be found convenient, Meat so cooking may be seen at any eating house in Smyrna or eastern town. When I rode across the Trode from Darjeeling to Hajik to Mount Ada, I noticed my dragoman and his men did all their outdoor cooking exactly in the Odyssean and Ilican. So that right there was a note from Samuel Butler about his travels and his own researches on the Odyssey. So that's very interesting that that style of eating still exists in the world today. So, do not soften things out of any pity for me, but tell me in all plainness exactly what you saw. My brave father Odysseus ever did you loyal service, either by word or deed, when you Achaeans were harassed among the Trojans. Bear it in mind now, as in my favor, and tell me truly all. My friend, answered Nestor, you recall a time of much sorrow to my mind. For the brave Achaeans suffered much, both at sea, while privateering under Achilles, and when fighting before the great city of King Priam. Our best men, all of them, fell there. Ajax, Achilles, Patroclus. So that's sort of another insult to Odysseus as well. He's like, all of our best men fell there, which is interesting because they're just kind of constantly testing each other throughout this. Fell there, pure the gods in console. My own dear son, Antilochus, a man singularly fleet of foot and in fight valiant. We suffered much more than this. What mortal tongue indeed could tell the whole story? Though you were to stay here and question me for 5 years or even 6, I could not tell you all that the Achaeans suffered, and you would turn homeward weary of my tale before it ended. 9 long years did we try every kind of stratagem, but the hand of heaven was against us. During all this time, there was no one who could compare with your father in subtlety. If indeed you are his son, I can hardly believe my eyes. And you talk just like him, too. No one would ever say that people of such different ages could speak so much alike. He and I never had any kind of difference, from the first to the last, neither in camp nor council, but in singleness of heart and purpose, which is interesting. He's saying that Odysseus is like the smartest man of his time, but also that they agreed on everything, so he's also complimenting himself as well. But saying he's subtle as well, which is kind of like almost an insult, too. It's like saying he's tricky. But singleness of heart and purpose, we advised the Argives how all might be ordered for the best. When, however, we sacked the city of Priam, so he's giving himself and Odysseus credit, and we were setting subtly though. We were setting sail in our ships as heaven had dispersed us, and then Zeus saw fit to vex the Argives on their homeward voyage, for they had not all been either wise or understanding, and hence many came to a bad end through the displeasure of Zeus's daughter Athena, who brought about a quarrel between the 2 sons of Atreus. Sons of Atreus called a meeting which was not as it should be. So he's blaming Athena, who's Odysseus' patron goddess, or favorite goddess, for the troubles of the Achaeans. So, sons of Atreus called a meeting which was not as it should be, for it was sunset, and the Achaeans were heavy with wine, when they explained why they had been called together. It seemed that Menelaus was for sailing homeward at once, and this displeased Agamemnon, who thought that we should wait till we had offered hecatombs to appease the anger of Athena. Fool that he was, wow, so he really doesn't like Athena, he might have known that he would not prevail with her. For when the gods have made up their mind, they do not change them lightly. So the 2 stood bandying hard words, whereon the Achaeans sprang to their feet with a cry that rent the air, and were of 2 minds as what they should do. That night we rested and nursed our anger, for Zeus was hatching mischief against us. Zeus is also kind of a rival of Poseidon, so Nestor seems to really identify with Poseidon here, which is just a meta pattern throughout the Odyssey of rivalries between these gods. So Zeus was hatching mischief against us, but in the morning some of us drew our ships into the water and put our goods with our woman on board, while the rest, about half in number, stayed behind with Agamemnon. We, the other half, embarked in sail, and the ships went well, for heaven had soothed the sea. When we reached Tenedos, we offered sacrifices to the gods, for we were longing to get home. This is interesting. So this actually has kind of parallels to the Gospels, wherein that in the Gospels, Jesus shows that the one true God is the God of wisdom, of heaven, of earth, of death, and of the ocean. Which is fascinating because the Greeks divided all of these things up. So they were like, oh, the gods are fighting. But it's like, no, there's just one God, which is the truth and the source of life and creation itself. Which is the innovation on the Greeks. I think the Greeks were incredibly wise. And they created the word logos that's later used in the Gospel of John to describe God. But they had this problem within their belief structure that made it very, very hard for them to get along in this way, as we can see. It's probably why they ended up being superseded by the Romans militarily, because the Romans just much more unified, much more unifying structure. But culturally, the Greeks, though, holy cow. So about half of us stayed behind with Agamemnon. We, the other half, embarked and sailed, and the ships went well, for heaven had smoothed the sea. When we reached Tenedos, we offered sacrifice to the gods, for we were longing to get home. Cruel Zeus, however, did not yet mean that we should do so, and raised a second quarrel in the course of which some among us turned their ships back and sailed away under Odysseus to make their peace with Agamemnon. But I and all the ships that were with me pressed forward, for I saw that mischief was brewing. The son of Tydeus went on also with me, and his crew with him. Later on, Menelaus joined us at Lesbos and found us making up our minds about our course, for we did not know whether to go outside Chiros by the island of Pysera, keeping this to our left, or inside Chiros over against the stormy headland of Miamis. So we asked heaven for a sign, and were shown one to the effect that we should be soonest out of danger if we headed our ships across the open sea to Euba. This we therefore did, and a fair wind sprang up. These are very, very accomplished seafaring people. They know what the heck they're doing. Therefore, this we did, and a fair wind sprang up, which gave us quick passage during the night to Gearustus, where we offered many sacrifices to Poseidon for having helped us so far on our way. 4 days later, Diomed and his men stationed their ships in Argos, but I held on for Pylos, and the wind never fell light from the day when heaven first made it fair for me. But I held on for Pylos. Therefore, my dear young friend, I returned without hearing anything about the others. I know neither who got home safely, nor whom were lost, but as is duty bound, I'll give you without reserve the reports that have reached me. So he just left. He was like, I don't honestly know, man. I don't even know what happened. I just fucking hightooked it out of there, and I resent Odysseus for getting everyone to turn back. And I don't really like Zeus, and I think Athena's a troublemaker, and I'm very much Poseidon's side. Poseidon's on my side. And all of this politeness is a formality. I don't know. I'll probably kill you in the morning. Let's see how it goes. So, since I have been here in my own house, they say the Myrmidons have returned safely under Achilles' son, Neoptolemus. So also did the valiant son of Poias, Philocides, Idomeneus, again, lost no men at sea. And all his followers who escaped death in the field got home safe with him to Crete. No matter how far out of the world you live, you will have heard of Agamemnon and the bad end he came at the hands of Aegisthus. A fearful reckoning did Aegisthus presently pay. See what a good thing it is for a man to leave a son behind him to do as Orestes did, who killed false Aegisthus, murderer of his noble father. You too, then, for you are a tall, smart-looking fellow. Show your mettle and make yourself a name in story. Nestor, son of Neleus, answered Telemachus, honor to the Achaean name. The Achaeans applaud Orestes in his name. So he's challenging Telemachus to like kind of do something. Or kind of like see if he's done something. Which is interesting. Honor to Nestor, son of Neleus, honor to the Achaean name, and the Achaeans applaud Orestes, and his name will live through all time, for he avenged his father nobly. Would that heaven might grant me to do like vengeance in the insolence to the wicked suitors who are ill-treating me and plotting my ruin. But the gods have no such happiness in store for me and for my father, so we must bear it as best we may. My friend, now that you remind me, I have heard your mother has many suitors who are ill-disposed towards you and making havoc of your estate. Do you submit to this tamely, or are you public feeling the voice of heaven against you? Or are public feeling the voice? Do you submit to this tamely, or are public feeling the voice of heaven against you? So he's basically saying, like, are you okay with this, or is there some reason why, or literally is like, are your own people and heaven itself against you? Very judgmental, very much a threat. Everything he says is a threat, which is very interesting. Who knows but what Odysseus may come back after all and pay these scoundrels in full, either single-handed or with a force of Achaeans behind him. If Athena were to take as great a liking to you as she did to Odysseus when we were fighting before Troy, for I never saw the gods so openly fond of anyone as Athena then was of your father. So yeah, he's jealous. If she would take as good care of you as she did him, these wooers would soon, some of them, forget their wooing. Telemachus answered, I can expect nothing of the kind. It would be far too much to hope for. Ooh, I dare not let myself think of it, even though the gods themselves willed that no such good fortune could befall me. On this, Athena said, Telemachus, what are you talking about? Heaven has a long arm. If it is minded to save a man, and if it were me, I should not care how much I had suffered before getting home, provided I could be home safe when I was once there. I'd rather this than get home quickly and be killed in my own house as Agamemnon was by the treachery of Aegisthus and his wife. Still, death is certain, and when a man's honor is come, not even the gods, when a man's hour is come, not even the gods can save him, no matter how fond they are of him. So she's saying that it's much, much better to get home at all than to get home at all late and be safe than get home quickly as Agamemnon did and then die, being killed by your wife's lover and your wife. Mentor, answers Telemachus, do not let us talk about it any more. There is no chance of my father ever coming back. The gods have long since counseled his destruction. There is something else, however, about which I should like to ask Nestor, for he knows much more than anyone else does. They say he has reigned for 3 generations, so that it is like talking to an immortal. Tell me, therefore, Nestor, and tell me true, how did Agamemnon come to die in that way? What was Menelaus doing, and how came the false Aegisthus to kill so far a better man than himself? Was Menelaus away from Achaean Argos, voyaging elsewhither among mankind, that Aegisthus took heart and killed Agamemnon? I'll tell you truly, answered Nestor, and indeed you have yourself divined how it all happened. If Menelaus, when he got back from Troy, had found Aegisthus still alive in his house, there would have been no borrow heap for him, not even when he was dead, but he would have been thrown outside the city, dogs and vultures. Not a woman would have mourned him, for he had done a deed of great wickedness. But we were over there fighting hard in Troy, while Aegisthus, who was taking his ease quietly in the heart of Argos, cajoled Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, with incessant flattery. At first she had nothing to do with his wicked scheme, for she was of a good natural disposition. Moreover, there was a bard with her, to whom Agamemnon had given strict orders on setting out for Troy that he was to keep guard over his wife. But when heaven had counseled her destruction, Aegisthus carried this bard off to a desert island and left him there for crows and seagulls to batten upon, after which she went willingly enough to the house of Aegisthus. So that's a veiled threat, too. He just killed this guy on a desert island. Then he offered many burnt sacrifices to the gods and decorated many temples with tapestries and gilding, for he had succeeded far beyond his expectations. Meanwhile, Menelaus and I were on our way home from Troy, on good terms with one another. When we got to Suninium, which is the point of Athens, Apollo, with his painless shafts, killed Phanerus, the steersman of Menelaus' ship, and a better man, and never a better man knew how to handle a vessel in rough weather, so that he died then and there with the helm in his hand. And Menelaus, though very anxious to press forward, had to wait in order to bury his comrade and give him due funeral rites. Presently, when he too could put to sea again, and had sailed as far on as the Melidian head, Zeus counseled evil against him, and made it blow hard till the waves ran mountains high. Here he divided his fleet and took one half towards Crete, where the Sciodians dwell, round the waters of the river Idanaurus. There it is a high headland hereabouts, stretching out into the sea from a place called Gortinian, and all along this part of the coast as far as Phaestus, the sea runs high when there is a south wind blowing. But after Phaestus, the coast is more protected, for a small headland can make great shelter. Here this part of the fleet was driven onto the rocks and wrecked, but the crew just managed to save themselves. As for the other 5 ships, they were taken by wind and seas to Egypt, where Menelaus gathered much golden substance among people of alien speech. Meanwhile, Aegisthus here at home plotted his evil deed. For 7 years after he had killed Agamemnon, he ruled in Mycenae, and the people were obedient under him. But in the 8th year, Orestes came back from Athens to be his bane and killed the murderer of his father. Then he celebrated the funeral rites of his mother and of the false Aegisthus by a banquet to the people of Argos. And on that very day, Menelaus came home with as much treasure as his ships could carry. Take my advice, then. Do not go traveling about for long so far from home, nor leave your property with such dangerous people in your house. They will eat up everything you have among them, and you will have been on a fool's errand. Still, I should advise you, by all means, go and visit Menelaus. Yeah. They end up plotting to take his stuff, which is interesting. But still, I advise you by all means to go and visit Menelaus, who has lately come off a voyage among such distant people as no man could ever hope to get back from. When the winds had once carried him so far out of his reckoning, even birds cannot fly the distance in a 12-month. So vast and terrible are the seas that they must cross. Go to him, therefore, by sea, and take your own men with you. Or if you would rather travel by land, you can have a chariot, you can have horses. And here are my sons who can escort you to Sparta, where Menelaus lives. Beg of him to speak the truth, and he will tell you no lies, for he is an excellent person. As he spoke, the sun set, and it came on dark. Whereon Athena said, Sir, all that you have said is well. Now, however, order the tongues of the victims to be cut, and mix wine, and we make drink offerings to Poseidon and the other immortals. Then go to bed, for it is bedtime. People should go away early and not keep late hours at a religious festival. So she is, I think, showing victims, tongues of the victims. I don't think these are human victims, but maybe they are. We'll see. Thus spoke the daughter of Zeus, and they obeyed her saying. Thus spoke the daughter of Zeus, and they obeyed her saying. Men servants poured water over the hands of the guests, while pages filled the mixing bowls with wine and water, and handed it round after giving every man his drink offering. They then threw the tongues of the victims into the fire and stood up to make their drink offerings. When they had made their offerings and had drunk each as much as he minded, Athena and Telemachus were for going on board the ship, but Nestor caught them at once and stayed them. Heaven and the immortal gods, he exclaimed, forbid that you should leave my house and go on board of a ship. Do Do you think I am so poor and short of clothes, or that I have so few cloaks and rugs to be unable to find you some comfortable beds for myself and for my guests? Let me tell you, I have a store of rugs and cloaks, and shall not permit the son of my old friend Odysseus to camp down on the deck of a ship while I live. Nor will my sons after me, but they will keep open house as I have done. Then Athena answered, Sir, you have spoken well, and it will be much better that Telemachus should do as you have said. He, therefore, shall return with you and sleep at your house, but I must go back and give orders to the crew and keep them in good heart. For I am the only older person among them. The rest are all young men of Telemachus' own age who have taken this voyage out of friendship. So she's constructed this to help Telemachus build friends of his own age in his own country. Just retire the ship and sleep there. Moreover, tomorrow I must go to the Cauconians, where I have a large sum of money long owing to me. As for Telemachus, now that he is your guest, send him to Sparta in a chariot, and let one of your sons go with him. Be pleased also to provide him with your best and fleetest horses. When she had thus spoken, she flew away in the form of an eagle, and all marveled as they beheld. Nestor was astonished and took Telemachus by his hand. My friend, said he, I see that you are going to be a great hero someday, since the gods wait upon you thus while you are still so young. This can have been none other of those who dwell in heaven than Zeus's redoubtable daughter, the Thryto-born, who showed such favor towards your brave father among the Argives. Holy Queen, he continued, vouchsafe to send down thy grace on myself, my good wife, and children. In return, I will offer you a sacrifice, a broad-browed heifer, a year old, unbroken, and never yet brought by a man under yoke. I will gild her horns and offer her up to the sacrifice. So Nestor is a very observant man who also notes signs, unlike the suitors, which is why they end up dying horribly. It's the best thing ever. Thus did he pray, and Athena heard his prayer. He then led the way to his own house, followed by his sons and his sons-in-law. When they had got there and had taken their places on the benches and seats, he mixed them a bowl of sweet wine that was 11 years old. When the housekeeper took the lid off the jar that held it, as he mixed the wine, he prayed much and made drink offerings to Athena, daughter of Aegis-bearing Zeus. Then, when they had made their drink offerings, and each drunk as much as he wanted, the others went home, each to his own abode, but Nestor put Telemachus to sleep in the room that was over the gateway, along with Pisistratus, who is the only unmarried son left him. So he put him to sleep actually in a room next to his son's bed, and he's honoring him. As for himself, he slept in an inner room of the house with his queen wife by his side, so he's not sleeping with his prostitutes. And he might not even have prostitutes, which is a theme. Now, when the child of morning, rosy-fingered dawn, appeared, Nestor left his couch, took his seat on the benches of white polished marble that stood in front of his house. Here aforetime sat Neleus, peer of gods in council, but he was now dead, and had gone to the house of Hades. This is Nestor's father. So Nestor sat in his seat, scepter in hand, as guardian of the public weal. So Nestor's sitting in his father's own seat, man who honors tradition. His sons, as they left their rooms, gathered round him. Cephaedron, Stratius, Perseus. So he has other sons as well who live with him, but they're all married. Perseus, Atreus, Thrasymedes, and the sixth son was Pisistratus. And when Telemachus joined them, they made him sit with them. Nestor then addressed them. My sons, said he, make haste to do as I bid you. I wish first and foremost to propitiate the great goddess Athena, who manifested herself visibly to me during yesterday's festivities. Go then, one or other of you, to the plain. Tell the stockman to look me out a heifer, and come here with it at once. Another must go to Telemachus' ship and invite all the crew, leaving 2 men only in charge of the vessel. Someone else will run and fetch Lersius, the goldsmith, to gild the horns of the heifer. So they put gold in the heifer. The rest of you, so he does this immediately too. Stay where you are. Wow, acts quickly. That's another theme that's also in the Odyssey and in the Bible. The rest, stay where you are. Tell the maids in the house to prepare an excellent dinner and to fetch seats and logs of wood for the burnt offering. Tell them also to bring me some clear spring water. So he has all this already on hand, which means he's also a very prepared man. On this, they hurried off on their several errands. The heifer was brought in from the plain, and Telemachus's crew came from the ship. The goldsmith brought the anvil, hammer, and tongs with which he worked his gold, and Athena herself came to accept the sacrifice. Nestor gave out the gold, and the smith gilded the horns of the heifer, that the goddess might have pleasure in their beauty. Then Stratius and a Cephedron brought her in by the horns. Atreus fetched water from the house in a ewer that had a flowery pattern in it, and in the other hand he held a basket of barley meal. Sturdy Thrasymedes stood by with a sharp axe ready to strike the heifer, while Perseus held the bucket. Then Nestor began washing his hands, sprinkling. So they're all ready to do this. They've done this many times. They're a well-oiled machine of a family. Offered many a prayer to Athena as he threw a lock from the heifer's head upon the fire. That's something I work on too, honestly, just working with my family a lot, trying to be a very well-oiled, effective machine of family. When they had done praying and sprinkling the barley meal, Thrasymedes dealt his blow, brought the heifer down with a stroke that cut through the tendons of the base of the neck, so he just chopped her head off in one stroke. Wherein the daughters and daughters-in-law of Nestor and his venerable wife, Eurydice, she was the eldest daughter from Clymenus, screamed with delight. They lifted the heifer's head from the ground, and Pisistratus cut her throat. Then, when they had done the bleeding and she was quite dead, they cut her up. They cut out the thigh bones, all in due course, wrapped them round in 2 layers of fat, and set. So they're like really honoring Athena, and set some pieces of raw meat on top of them. Always honoring with meat. Meat is the prized food that they always eat, that restores life. Then Nestor laid them upon the wood fire and poured wine over them, while the young men stood near him with 5-pronged spits in their hands. When the thighs were burned and they had tasted the inward meat, they cut the rest of the meat up small, put the pieces on spits, and tossed them over the fire. Meanwhile, the lovely Polycaste, Nestor's youngest daughter, washed Telemachus. When she had washed him, so he's trying to set her up a Polycaste, and anointed him with oil, she brought him a fair mantle and shirt, and he looked like a god as he came out of the bath, and took his seat by the side of Nestor. When the outer meats were done, they drew them off the spits, and sat down to dinner, where they were waited upon by some worthy henchmen, who kept pouring them out their wine in cups of gold. As soon as they had enough to eat and drink, Nestor said, "Sons, put Telemachus's horses to the chariot, that he may start at once." Thus did he speak, and they, even as he had said, yoked the fleet of horses to the chariot. The housekeeper packed them up provisions of bread, wine, and sweetmeats fit for the sons of princes. Then Telemachus got into the chariot, while Pisistratus gathered up the reins and took his seat beside him. He lashed the horses on, and they flew forward, and nothing loath, into the open country, leaving the high citadel of Pylos behind them. A citadel is a little castle inside of a city where you can go in the case of siege. So I just find that very interesting. Citadels are very common in that era. All that day did they travel, swaying the yoke upon their necks till the sun went down, and darkness was all over the land. Then they reached Pherae, where Diocles lived, who was the son to Ortilochus and grandson to Alpheus. Here they passed the night, and Diocles entertained them hospitably. When the child of morning, rosy-fingered Dawn, appeared, they again yoked their horses and drove out through the gateway under the echoing gatehouse. Pisistratus lashed the horses on, and they flew forward, nothing loth. Presently they came to the corn lands of open country. In the course of time completed their journey. So well did their steeds take them. That is very interesting. So That is fascinating that they didn't even sleep. They said they were gonna like have him go to bed, and then they did the sacrifice to Athena, and then right after the sacrifice, they just sent them on their way. So in some sense he's isolating Telemachus from the rest of his men, which is interesting. Just subtly did that. It's like, oh yeah, no, now you're leaving, and then he just sends them off. So after they had even more wine, sends them off, and they have them stay the night where Diocles lives, and Diocles entertains them, and then they go on the morning and leave and go forward to Sparta, which is where book 3 ends.